Let me introduce, I've already introduced my two sisters from two places. And I also introduced my adopted daughter, granddaughter, Bharathi Adhikari, who is a student of
Okay,
Toronto
namaskar
University.
everybody.
And I dedicate this deliberation to Bharathi's generation, particularly as they are the custodian of what we'll be talking about today. The
Okay.
key message of this talk or discussion is that heat wave is rising menacingly, making the life in many places very difficult, unbearable, and even pushing some parts of the world beyond human survival limit.
Every place.
Heat wave that was unknown in colder countries of Europe, US, has now become a new normal there. As a result of this, massive wildfires are scorching vast stretch of virgin forest in Canada, USA, Turkey, Greece, and so on. And on the other hand, severe rain and the consequent flood is bringing devastation in Asia, Europe, USA. The world now appears to be buckling under severe heat stress, and it is extracting heavy tolls of life, economy, and construction, and destruction. Let me share with you a collage that I have here. Let me present this. The extreme heat wave is doing around the world. This is challenging our current world's wisdom of doing nothing or too little, too late to fight it out. It's we who are doing it. We don't take it seriously enough. For example, when autumn will come in next 2 months, we'll simply forget all about it and continue with business as usual. Unfortunately, my generation, who control the power, do have the capacity to forget our duty that we have for our protection of grandchildren. Anyway, let's dive into this topic to understand what is happening around the world right now and what lies in store for us in future. On a personal note, you might be wondering that what connection do I have with this topic? Heat wave is nothing new to me and to many present here today who grew up in Asansol, a small town in the coal mining belt of India. Every summer, the blowing heat that we used to call Lu will sweep over the town when we will close all doors and windows and hang wet clothes on, to keep our lives inside bearable. Now, growing up in the coal belt drove my early life passion towards research on coal burning. But in early 2000s, the warning of global warming started surfacing, and that prompted me to switch to biomass conversion, and I started teaching climate change in my classes. The shackles of grant and market-driven research have tied me to these R&D till 2020, after which I got the freedom to look around and was horrified to see how dangerously the fossil fuel burning that I was working on so far is driving humanity towards a path of immense suffering and disaster. And this background prompted me to dive into this topic and share that with you today. Although the association of climate change and heat wave is very close, but we'll leave in the discussion of climate change for a future date. I won't touch that. Now let's try to understand, to start the discussion, Why and how we feel hot? Why do we feel hot? It's a physiochemical process. Our body is a chemical factory designed to work within a narrow temperature zone of 37 degrees Celsius. The metabolic heat generated within our body is carried by our blood to the skin, and which, being hotter than the ambience, lose heat to the air by means of convection and radiation. This process of heat transfer from the body makes us feel hot. The more heat is transferred, hotter we feel. When the ambient temperature increases further, the heat loss from the skin becomes inadequate through this process. So then our brain prompts the sweat glands under the skin to open, and sweat evaporates from our skin, taking off much greater amount of heat. This cooling depends on the difference in the moisture on our skin and that on the ambient. So when the humidity in the ambient increases, this difference decreases and our skin struggles to dissipate the required heat through sweating. And owing to this additional effort of our body, we feel more uncomfortable, more miserable when humidity increases. The sweating make our body lose much heat, that's all right. But along with it, it also release water, sodium, and potassium from our body, which luckily is compensated by our kidney. When the ambient temperature increases further, the blood flow to the skin increases, and on the skin, the blood vessels dilate to help radiate more heat from the skin. But this increased blood flow to the skin, unfortunately, deprives some vital parts of the body, like heart, lungs, kidney, etc., which could eventually fail, leading to heat stroke or even death. For this reason, people with a cardiovascular weakness and elderly people with a fragile system are particularly vulnerable to heat stress. Now, let me introduce one new term, which may not be all familiar. It's called wet bulb temperature. This is very important in the current context, because wet bulb temperature combines the effect of both temperature and humidity of the air. Let me show you a picture here. If we cover the bulb of the thermometer with wet clothes, water will evaporate from the bulb in the same way the water evaporates from a skin, losing heat. So the temperature indicated by a wet bulb thermometer shows the effect of both temperature and humidity on the ambience, while the dry bulb thermometer, one on the left, that indicates the temperature of the air alone. Now, the comfort or discomfort depends on the wet bulb temperature, not dry bulb temperature. Just to give an example, that let's look at this figure. That if you're in ambience at 120 degrees Fahrenheit with 5% humidity, and we will feel the same level of comfort or discomfort at a much lower temperature of 88 degrees Fahrenheit, but at a 90% humidity. Why? Why we're feeling the same amount of comfort or discomfort at two vastly different temperatures? Because even though dry bulb temperature is different, but the wet bulb temperature in both is the same. Both have the same temperature, 110 degrees Fahrenheit. So it is actually the wet bulb temperature that determines and defines the comfort, discomfort, or even fatality. Okay, so now let's pause here for a moment and see how and why people die due to extreme heat. It's a combination of mm, high temperature, humidity, physical activity, inadequate hydration. Our body generates more heat than it can dissipate away. Its core temperature rises above the 37 degrees Celsius, which I mentioned earlier, was the temperature for functioning internal organ. This results in a dangerous buildup of heat inside, resulting in a failure of vital organs, heart attack, kidney failure, brain damage, which you can see in the sequence event. Let's do the top one. When the more blood goes to the skin because of high temperature, then we have low blood flow to other part of the body like gut. Then toxin leaks out of the gut. Then we have widespread inflammation and clotting that leads to organ failure. Similarly, in a heart attack, when more blood goes to the skin, then we have decreased blood pressure. That increases heart rate. Heart requires more oxygen, which you cannot get. It is strained, leads to heart attack. So these sequence events that leads to failure. Now, based on this, people have defined threshold limit of human survival, which means person cannot survive above this temperature. Traditionally, a wet bulb temperature of 35 degrees Celsius was taken as the human limit of survival, which means a young, healthy person cannot survive any more than 6 hours working out in the sun. But the recent research has shown that this temperature that we used to take traditionally grossly underestimates the human survival limit. I'm giving you a figure to show you the human survival limit depends on 2 other factors, besides temperature. It depends on the age of the person, if a young person or older person like us, or if the person is working inside or working out in the sun. Let me show you an example that a person, young, healthy person, working indoor can easily work up to 50 degrees Celsius. Incidentally, the yellow band means it's a comfortable zone. You can work here. But on the right-hand side, this blue or red or white, these are beyond survival limit. You cannot survive on this side. And this thick line, that shows the demarcation line between survivability or non-survivability. So, as I was mentioning, the young person can work at 50 degrees Celsius up to 20% humidity. But if the same person work outside, even at 20 degrees or even at 0 humidity, he won't survive because he's in this region. On the other side, a elderly person, there's no way, as you can see, this 50 degrees Celsius is well in the death zone, whether inside or outside. Now, I would like to show you the difference between the traditional survival limit of 35 degrees Celsius, which is shown by thin line here, and that currently discovered actual limit, survival limit. Quite a bit of difference between these two. So mm, now, with that background, let's get familiar with a few heat-related terms that news media, government all at times talk about. Because we often say, oh, it's too hot today. But how do you quantify the degree of hotness? There are several parameters which are used to quantify them. For example, hot days. What is hot days? The World Meteorological Organization defines hot days as days when the maximum temperature exceeds the mean temperature at a location. Please note, I said at a location, which could vary, by 5 degrees Celsius for more than 5 consecutive days. For example, in India, this temperature is 40 degrees Celsius. If the temperature is above 40 degrees Celsius, it is considered hot days. Whereas in Canada, that temperature is 30 degrees Celsius. If the temperature exceeds 30 degrees Celsius, we'll call it hot days. People that laugh, hey, with 32 degrees, they are saying that they're too hot days, because that's how it works. Now, hot hours is another one, annual hot hour. It's the number of hours the temperature at a location exceeds the threshold limit of survival. Please note, if it exceeds threshold limit of survival for working out in the sun. For example, at 1.5 degree global warming level, annual hot hours in Delhi will be 16 hours per year. Lahore, it will be 69 hours per year, which means in whole year in Delhi, there was 16 hours when the temperature is so hot, a person trying to work outside will die. But don't be scared about the earlier phrase. I said 1.5 degree global warming. I'll talk about that later on. Next, the heat wave. We often talk about heat wave. What is heat wave? Heat wave in generally is a period when unusually high heat stays at a place for several consequent days. In the US, it is defined as a period of 2 or more days with a daily minimum temperature exceeding 85th percentile of historical July-August temperature. This is what is they define. The definition is different in other countries. There's another parameter which is often used in India. It is called heat index. I like this one. This parameter represents the level of comfort or discomfort, taking into account of both temperature and humidity. Some people also call it feel-like temperature. In the weatherman often says, today is minus 10 degrees Celsius, but it feels like minus 20. This temperature, the heat index, is measured under shade. In India, heat index above 40 degrees Celsius is considered uncomfortable, but it's dangerous after 45 degrees Celsius. Okay, with that, let's look at the impact of heat wave. Heat stress is one such parameter. Heat stress occurs when the body is unable to regulate its core temperature at 37 degrees Celsius. And generally, heat stroke hit a person when the body core temperature rises to 40 degrees Celsius. And that prompts rapid heartbeat, red hot skin, nose sweating, dizziness, headache. These are the symptoms of heat stroke. Heat stroke also causes vomiting, unconsciousness, and finally, it could cause death. Anyway, so with this background, let's see what is happening around the world. So this has been the background. Now we see what is there out in the world. As I mentioned earlier, world is under severe heat wave. Europe is the front line of global warming. For example, Spain experienced highest temperature in the last 64 years. England experienced highest temperature since 1884. So this, let me share with you a video of
Shelters under a blanket of stifling heat. Tourists come to visit the capital have struggled to handle the unprecedented heat wave over the weekend. And multiple wildfires have broken out
in some of the nation's largest cities, from New York, blistering stretch, also prompting a very high heat risk at the Grand Canyon and turning deadly. Officials in St. Anne, Missouri, confirming a woman dying in her house due to danger.
the peak temperature in Europe was 46.6 in Portugal, 46 in Spain, 45.7 Italy, 39.3 in Germany, and 41.9 in Japan, Delhi 43, and many places in Pakistan and the Middle East, they are reeling under 50 degrees Celsius. And these are causing huge health and infrastructure issues. But we are particularly worried about the heat wave in Iceland and Greenland. As you can see from here, that the temperature increase above the normal, which you call anomaly, darker that color, more the anomaly is highest in Greenland. Greenland is the custodian of world's ice, and that is melting now. It is plus 14 degrees Celsius. Iceland recorded 29.5. Dipuda can tell me that how does this temperature look like in Iceland? It's probably, it was not very common there. So these temperatures in those northern countries have a serious consequence on the world's ecosystem. Now, one of the major impact is the wildfire, because the high heat is drying the ground, and even slightest spark can bring wildfire. And that is happening all over the world. Europe is in the track for its worst wildfire season so far. As France, Spain, Albania, Portugal, Greece, all are battling raging deadly fire. Let me show you another video of wildfire.
frantically alongside firefighters, using hoses and buckets to hold back the flames. They are desperately fighting to save their homes as wildfires continue to burn throughout the country.
I was supposed to be in Bilbao.
Threatening, but in a different way. Wildfires. This is the devastation in Greece. The tragedy is written on the face of this man who's lost his livelihood after his petrol station burned to the ground. In recent days, France and Spain have struggled to bring devastating and deadly blazes under control. Global warming and local catastrophes. Does Europe have to adapt more rapidly to a hot new world? Global warming and local catastrophes. Does Europe have to adapt more rapidly to a hot new world?
So far, Europe has seen about nearly 1,500 wildfires. That's scorched more than 350 million hectares. As I speak, the wildfire is raging Albania, Turkey, Portugal, Greece, and in North America, US and Canada is also witnessing one of the worst wildfires. Let me show you this photograph I took a couple of days back. This wildfire in Saskatchewan, which is 3,000 kilometers away from Toronto, that smoke, as you can see, it's blanketed the Toronto sky. Even at morning, not early morning, as you can see from the position of the sun, it's all covered. So, and we can literally smell the smoke from here. So, this has a very long-ranging effect on this. So anyway, so let us look at now other more serious impact of heat wave. It is the loss of human life. So far, globally, nearly 489,000 lives are lost every year due to heat wave. And Europe is the front seat. Europe has a population of only 740 million people, but they are accounting for 36% of global death from heat wave. Malaysia, with a 4.8 billion population, accounts for only 45% death. Europe has more than fair share of death. For example, between 2022 and 2024, they saw nearly 300,000 deaths. Russia, in just 44 days, had 56,000 deaths. And one of the worst disasters of heat-related death happened in Paris in 2003, when at a relatively low temperature of 26 degrees wet bulb temperature, way below the survival limit, it killed nearly 15,000 people. It shows that even the wealthy, advanced countries are not only immune to the effect of heat wave and wildfire, they are most vulnerable. USA also, the death rate has increased, has doubled. Though some people speculate, they under-report the actual death. One of the worst casualty of heat wave death happened in Saudi Arabia last year, where in 5 days, more than 1,300 people died in Makkah when the temperature rose to 50 degrees Celsius and wet bulb temperature 29.5. Incidentally, if you refer to the graph I showed you earlier, this limit is above the human survival limit for working outside. And most of the people were pilgrims. They died while they're circumventing the holy shrine. Luckily, the heat wave death in India is relatively low. It rose only from 1,075 in 2005 to 1,907 2015. In fact, per capita heat-related death in India is far below that in Europe. Why? These Europeans are more advanced, more resourceful. Two factors are contributing to this. Number one, Europe is warming twice as fast as the rest of the world. India is warming all right, but at a slower pace than the rest of the world. That's a good thing for India. And compared to other countries, Europe is less prepared to face death, face heat wave, because they are traditionally cold countries. Now, with this, I'm sure that some of you might be wondering, why? Why are we getting so many heat waves? What's wrong? The simple answer is world is getting hotter. And if you ask me why world is getting hotter, because we the human, are recklessly burning fossil fuels, releasing heat-trapping gases to the atmosphere, and not doing enough to stop this, knowing fully well the consequence. Earth has been in a thermal equilibrium for millions of years. It receives heat from the sun and dissipated back to the outer space. Any additional heat generated in the Earth is absorbed by ocean and land. Thus, the Earth has been in a stable thermal equilibrium for millennia. But over the last 200 years, that is since the Industrial Revolution, the concentration of heat-absorbing gases in the atmosphere is rising. This is due to human activities like excessive burning of coal, oil, gas, and burning petrol in the car. These gases are trapping heat in the Earth's atmosphere, and additionally, the ocean that used to absorb about 93% of excess heat in the Earth now absorbing much less. Land and vegetation also absorbing much less. Consequently, the total heat on the Earth is increasing. Let me show you that, share with you a figure on how. As you can see, since the early 70s, it was warming at a rate of about 0.06 degrees Celsius per decade. That's 10 years. But from 2010, it started rising almost exponentially. There is a 3 times increase in the rate of heating. Now, why? The reason is because we are pumping more greenhouse gas into the atmosphere. Because Earth's heat balance is directly influenced by how much greenhouse gas human activities add to the atmosphere. So let me share with you another figure. Yeah, this shows it better. So here, what we see here, this is the year 1990 to 2100 projection. This is where we are now. And on the right-hand side is a scientist projection based on human behavior, how the greenhouse gas will increase and what temperature that will reach. Now, if we worked sustainably, global warming could have been restricted to 1.2 degree to 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial revolution. You can see with this green line. And this is what I used to teach in my class to the students before 2020. But unfortunately, our inaction and current lifestyle made us miss that window of opportunity that we had earlier. If we are now following this path. Even now, if we follow an optimistic scenario, which is shown this one, we'll reach a temperature rise of 1.9 to 2.1 degrees Celsius by the end of this century. Now you might wonder, what is the 1.9, 2.1, or the dreadful 2.9, 2.5 degrees Celsius? The climatologists predict if we follow this path and see a temperature rise 2.5 to 2.9 degrees Celsius, this was for USA, says that entire East Coast, from New Jersey to Midwest, half of California will see extreme heat 3 months, please remember, 3 months in a year, when just stepping out will put one at the risk of dying. And this could happen in India also. And some predict it could happen to India as early as 2050 if we continue at the current rate of warming. Such temperature rise is hugely dangerous for life on Earth, as well as for another thing which many people don't realize, that 1.5 degree rise is a magical number. Because above this number rise, feedback loop might kick in. What is feedback loop? It is like a self-propagating chain reaction, like a nuclear explosion. It just goes on increasing. Temperature goes on increasing without an external addition of heat to self-sustaining systems. And that will take the world well beyond control. You cannot get back from there. Okay, so with this feature, let's stop and look at two important parameters which is driving current heating. One is heat dome. What is heat dome? You can see it here. I'm sorry. Yes. The certain atmospheric condition develops a high pressure zone in the upper atmosphere, and that stays static for a prolonged period of time. And this traps hot air, creating a dome-like structure that prevents air from the rising and dissipating heat. Additionally, the hot high pressure push the air downwards, and through that process, adiabatic compression happens, and this air gets further heated. So, and also it doesn't allow any cloud to accumulate here. So there's unrestricted sun rays coming, and they virtually burn everything here. And this one happened in Canada. Now, you might wonder why that heat zone happens. I'll show that. I'm sorry. I show that using this figure of Canada. This is in the high atmosphere, jet stream goes around the world. And if due to temperature, reduced temperature between the pole and the equator, this jet stream gets slowed down, it bends. And sometimes it forms omega block like this. This is what happened in Lytton in British Columbia in 2021, where temperature rose to 49.6 degrees Celsius. In few days, nearly 700 people died. So this is one thing that is happening around the world. Other one which is important is urban heat island. Now, from this figure, you can see the temperature inside the city is about 4 degrees Celsius higher than temperature outside the city. In the night, this temperature could be 12 degrees Celsius higher than outside. Why? Because the cities are massive concrete jungles, very little greeneries. So it absorbs the heat throughout the day and releases during the day. So there is no area for absorption of heat. And that is making our current living in the cities particularly difficult. And this is another thing which you see in the streets. The high temperature is higher, even higher. Sometimes you can see 27 to 50 degrees Celsius higher. That leads to melting of asphalt on the street. We have seen this in Asansol in our childhood days, because Asansol used to get very hot, and we'll see the peak melting. But high temperature in the night is particularly dangerous for our body, because our body tries to cool down during the night. And if that time it's hot, the body cannot cool, and the heat stress continues to build, risking the risk of heat exhaustion. Now, this other impact of heat wave is rain and flood. High atmospheric temperature warms the water in the sea, in the water in the river, water in the lakes. That prompts high rate of evaporation of water to the atmosphere. For example, this year, sea surface temperature in the European region was 0.7 degrees Celsius higher than the average, while that in the Mediterranean Sea, it was 1.2 degrees Celsius higher. The condition is even worse in Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea, where the temperature is touched about 30 degrees Celsius this year. There's increased evaporation, high moisture in the atmosphere, and that is leading to one of the wettest years in the Western Europe, and huge rainfall in Mumbai and Eastern India. We see that daily in the news. The flood in Europe is affecting more than 400,000 people, and about 335 lives are lost. And we have seen similar loss in India too. Hong Kong and many parts of China are also being battered by huge rainfall and massive floods. This is all caused due to the climate change, El Nino, and warming. Let me show you, share with you a video of this flood in China and a few other countries. This is happening this year, just now.
Toppling infrastructure. The visual showing what remains after the disaster. Meanwhile, shots of relief operations on the province of Aug'24 show emergency responders retrieving one dead body after
Latest
another.
news, it has increased, death has increased to 1,400 in Pakistan.
With visuals showing what remains after the
India's
disaster.
Himalayas,
Meanwhile,
rarely
shots of
so
relief operations
overwhelming.
from the province of
A wall
Aug'24
of it
show emergency
crashing through
responders
villages this
retrieving
week.
one dead body after another
This
from
is
the
the
rain-affected
location.
districts.
Locals
Rain
describe a
is still hampering
cloudburst.
efforts.
10 centimeters of rain
India's
falling in an
Himalayas,
hour.
but rarely so overwhelming. A wall of it crashing through villages this week.
This is Europe.
Locals describe a cloudburst. 10 centimeters of rain falling in an hour.
On June 30th, 2025, Norio Frejus into a destructive torrent that swept through the mountain town of Aug'24, submerging entire neighborhoods and claiming one life.
Now,
On June
this
30th,
sudden
2025,
flash flood in mountain
Norio
town,
Frejus into a
that
destructive
needs
torrent
special
that swept through the
consideration.
mountain town of Aug'24, submerging entire
Because
neighborhoods
we know that
and claiming
India is
one life.
facing unseasonal heavy rainfall due to climate change. But what is particularly worrying is the flash flood in the Himalayan region and the mountains region across the world. And that is primarily due to glacial lake outburst flood. Why? Because high heat is warming mountain snows and the glaciers, and that is happening in the alarming rate. And this melting of snows, they uh, they are forming numerous small lakes, and they are protected by small moraine dam. And then, if due to sudden heavy rain or melting of huge chunk of snow due to the high temperature, the water level in the lake suddenly increases, and that greatly increases the hydrostatic pressure at the bottom of this lake here, and that uh, collapses the moraine wall. And that you have seen that how these huge amount of water, along with this moraine, everything rushes down the uh, valley. So, what lies? What lies for us in future? Well, severe uh, heat wave, wildfire, drought, unseasonal precipitation, massive flood, mudslide, they have almost become a new normal. They are no longer once in a while event. World is about to breach the 1.5-degree threshold limit, which was agreed to in the 2015 Paris Climate Conference. It is now heading towards 2 degrees Celsius warming, which might inflict, as I mentioned earlier, devastating and irreversible damage to the world. Now let's look at how different heating are warming up. Incidentally, that all this heating that I'm talking about, they are not surprising. They are all predicted. Scientists have been predicting them well ahead of time, warning people. They were not listening. And what is interesting, the actual situation is worse than what scientists predicted. For example, in Toronto, they predicted the hot days will be this year 16 days. But we have already crossed 23 days so far. And it will increase to 51 days by 2050 and 77 days into 2100. In Europe is experiencing even worse heat stress every year. Number of strong heat stress, which is greater than 30 degrees Celsius, that increased from 12 to 28 over the last couple of years. An extreme heat stress, that is 46 degrees Celsius, that increased from 0.1 to 0.45 day per year. And it will be even worse under high warming level. Now let's zoom into India. What's happening in India? Indian cities are warming at a rate of 0.53 degrees Celsius per decade, which is twice the world average. At warming at 37% higher rate than the rural areas. This requires a little explanation. Earlier I said that India is warming at a pace lower than the rest of the world, but Indian cities are warming faster than the cities elsewhere. This is an interesting thing one needs to. Why? Because rapid urbanization is losing green coverage in the cities, and that's making the situation worse. In 2022, registered 36 hot days in Delhi with average temperature of 33.4, and this is by 2050, and that is slated to increase to 48 days. But I would like to share with you a projection of how hot days will increase around the world. And they are pictured as really scary. Okay. As you can see here, Delhi is in the middle of the pack. At 1.5 degrees Celsius, Delhi is likely to have 16 hot hours. But at 4 degrees warming, it will have 386 hot hours. Uh, Other places like Aden, Lahore, they are much worse. They already have 69 hot hour right now, and they are like to increase to 566, and Aden nearly 1,000. Fortunately, further east, Kolkata, Dhaka, they are not that bad. They are much lower hot days. But please note, what I mentioned here, just hot hours. I didn't talk about humidity. While Lahore, Aden has high temperature but lower humidity. But Dhaka, Karachi, Kolkata has low temperature but high humidity. Just to illustrate this point, Karachi in 2021, that has a temperature of 45 degrees Celsius, not very high compared to other places. But in 5 days, it has about 1,200 deaths. Why? Because humidity was 79% there that time. So this is a important thing to remember, that is not the humidity, it is the humidity that's the important thing. Okay, so what is the other impact? We have seen the impact of heat wave on the life, property. Next, economic losses. And that's very important for decision makers, because decision makers, they put profit above collective well-being. And this should be, if they hit it, a wake-up call for them. Natural disaster in the US that cost already $131 billion this in the first 6 months this year. How do you stack up against rest earlier? In the last 30 years in the United States, average yearly loss was only 79 billion, which means we have already doubled the figure in the first 6 months. And if we look at worldwide, the loss due to productivity will exceed $2 trillion by 2030. Not very far, by 2030. And then the Delhi could see a loss of 24% productivity for indoor work and 30% productivity loss for outdoor work, resulting in a $6 billion loss in Delhi. So you might wonder, why very little is being done about it against all these things? But before I answer this question, let me share you some facts. Then I will answer this question. Number one, renewable energy creates 3 times more jobs per dollar invested than fossil fuel industries. To give an example, as we speak, in last few years, in the US, 4.46 million people found job in the clean energy sector against only 2 million people in the oil industry. Figure is very similar in Canada too. In Canada, the clean energy employment grew to nearly 24,000 as opposed to only 22,000 people employed in oil sand. This is the employment. Now about cost. Traditionally, people have been arguing, oh no, the transition is very expensive. But right now, the cost of electricity from solar is less than half from that from coal, oil, or gas plants. In the transport sector, even with the higher purchase price of electric cars, the total cost of ownership is 18,000 cheaper than that by a petrol car. Why? Because electric car has lower maintenance, lower fuel consumption. And with the new generation EV, which are coming in next 1 year, even the purchase price of EV will be lower than the petrol car. Now, let me share with you the studies of social scientists, the socioeconomic and scientific studies they carried out over the last 10 years have consistently shown the same results. Rapid, full-scale transition to fossil fuel-free sustainable economy is more resilient, more profitable than the current fossil fuel-based system. And this transition will make the Earth more habitable, more equitable, more enjoyable, and most importantly, more profitable for the market. A transition away from fossil fuel can or could have avoided the present suffering from heat wave that we're experiencing now. The question remains, despite all these things, all facts, why change is not taking place? Because of two reasons. Number one, we lack collective political willness. Two, we are driven by our inherent inertia of sliding down along the path, even if it's sliding down to destruction. The scientists have been warning us with solid evidence about the dire consequences, yet our media and we, therefore our politicians, are far too busy with the very short-term issues like a war in Ukraine, Trump, tariff, and all these things. Well, our very existence is at stake. I'm sure that when I talked about 1.5 degrees Celsius that will kick in a self-propagating heat wave, not many of you accept that at all, realistic. But this is a very, very dangerous situation. It's going to happen. My generation, who are in the control, is thus committing a severe crime against the earth, humanity, as well as to our grandchildren by not doing enough to slow down the oncoming disaster. We have already missed the window of opportunity in 2020. But what we could do now, we can slow it down. But unfortunately, we are leaving our future generation an earth which will be unlivable, much warmer with the self-destruction process.